When it comes to Namco-made fighting games, the most popular is, of course, Tekken. Selling over 7 copies worldwide for most entries makes it one of the best-selling fighting game franchises ever. While Tekken is awesome if you enjoy J-pop catgirls fighting jaguar mask-wearing pro wrestlers in a 3D volcano while the most insane drop I've ever heard in my life plays in the background, this insanity may alienate some players out there who demand a more refined, realistic approach to 3D fighting. No, I'm not talking about Sega's Virtua Fighter for the billionth time, believe it or not. But I am talking about Tekken's cousin, which is also developed by Namco. The first Soulcalibur game was released in 1998 for the arcades and Dreamcast, and is now considered to be one of the greatest fighting games of all time for its deep gameplay, memorable characters, beautiful visuals, and plentiful single and multiplayer content. If you're making a sequel to a beloved property, you have to do it bigger and better. Ignore Soulcalibur 5, and that's exactly what Namco achieved back in the early 2000s with their next fighting game. Armed to the teeth with swords, nunchucks, giant axes, staffs, and watermelons, it's time to return to the stage of history and reflect on arguably the best fighting game on the PS2, Xbox, and Gamecube, 2002 Soulcalibur 2. With that out of the way, let's dive into the character roster. Soulcalibur 2 contains 23 playable characters, but there are some differences depending on the console you play on. If you're playing the PlayStation 2 version, then you gain access to Heihachi Mishima from Tekken. At first, I had no idea how this was going to work, because while the other characters fight with weapons, Heihachi fights with his fists. The developers got around this issue by equipping him with a series of gauntlets I'm not even going to try and pronounce. However, it's been reported that Cloud Strife from the Final Fantasy series was meant to be the PS2 guest character, but licensing issues prevented this from happening. The Xbox version of the game, oddly enough, has Todd McFarlane's comic book character Spawn as its guest character. While Spawn couldn't have his awesome cape due to the Xbox not having the power to render a complete set of detailed animations that were constantly on screen with the physics, he makes up for it by having a huge axe that he wields in battle, and he also looks pretty cool. Finally, if you're playing on the Gamecube, then you gain access to arguably the best guest character in series history. Everyone's favourite green tunic wearing hero, Zelda. Other than the guest characters, the rest of the roster is the same for the 3 versions of the game. Characters from the original Soulcalibur like Astaroth, Ivy, Killick, Maxi, Nightmare, Voldo, and Xianghua all make a return in Soulcalibur 2 among others, and new characters Cassandra, Raphael, Talim, and Yunsung show up to introduce some new blood into the cast. What's great about Soulcalibur 2 is that all the characters look and feel different to play. Nightmare is big and slow, but he does high damage with his long-reach attacks. Maxi is best at mid-range and can't fight from long distances, but he's fast and can throw the opponent off their game with his speed. Voldo is still the sex offenders registry poster boy we all know and love with his bizarre outfit, creepy movement, and Chad walk. And Charade is nightmare fuel, but the point is that the game has a varied character roster, which is good. Whether you want to battle at long ranges with Killick, get up close and personal with Talim, or want your roommates to awkwardly enter and then silently exit the room upon seeing you playing as Ivy, Soulcalibur 2 has a character for everyone. Nice! Moving on to how the game actually plays, Soulcalibur 2 is a 4-button fighter like Tekken, although it plays completely differently. You have a block button and 3 attack buttons, horizontal slash, vertical slash, and a melee button, which is usually a kick. Movement is also a lot faster than Tekken. You know how if you want to optimally move backwards in Tekken, you have to be born here, here, or here? Soulcalibur 2 lets me move Link around pretty quickly by mashing on my D-pad, which tells me that this game has a greater emphasis on poking and movement rather than long damaging combos, thank god. Every character's move list has several pages dedicated for moves and combos that start with each attack button, which is a fantastic addition to a complex 3D fighting game such as this. Do you want to learn a Sophidia attack string that starts with a horizontal slash? Well, the game has got you covered with a boatload of options. Regarding the defensive aspects of the game, holding the block button down while neutral will give you a standing block that defends against highs and mids, and holding down and block gives you a block that blocks lows. Mastering going between the two without leaving yourself open is essential to winning a match, so knowing your opponent's strings is key to survival, as blocking low as they do a mid is a surefire way to get yourself hit. The game also has a complete throw game with different animations for each character to add another layer of depth to the fighting systems, but arguably the most nerve-wracking and hype-inducing part of the game and the entire series at large is the ring-out system. Got your opponent near the edge of the map? Then go for a no-scope with Link to take them out. The risk of ringouts provide another layer of strategy to the game, as it enforces that you must have strong movement to A, not be put near the edge in the first place, and B, to escape the edge if you do find yourself there. To assist with this, the game comes equipped with a full 8-way movement system. What this means is that not only can you move left, right, up and down, but also diagonally. You can both walk and run in any direction you want, which is both really fun to do and easy to understand for casual players. Fighting games nowadays often come under fire for a lack of meaningful content, but fear not, because Soulcalibur 2 kills it in this regard. You have Arcade Mode, a series of fights with a final boss against Inferno, Versus Battle, where you fight another player, Time Attack, which is Arcade Mode but you have to beat it in the quickest possible time, Survival, a gauntlet of 50 rounds straight that challenges you to beat them all without losing once, Team Battle and Versus Team Battle, which are essentially the team battle mode from Tekken, where you play with teams of multiple characters, and finally, Practice. There are also the extra modes, which are the same as the ones I just described, but they allow you to use weapons you've collected during your journey in the much loved Weapon Master mode. Weapon Master acts as the story or quest mode of Soulcalibur 2, and it involves you having to travel around a map of Europe and participating in different challenges to collect weapons for the characters to use in other modes. As you play, you gain experience and are provided with a rank, and there are 99 ranks in total. Weapon Master is awesome, as it's a single player mode in a fighting game that doesn't feel tacked on or boring. It's legitimately fun to see how many weapons you can collect while traveling down multiple paths and completing challenges. Playing through Weapon Master will unlock new characters, weapons, stages, modes, and costumes, so it's worth the time needed to complete it. Overall, Soulcalibur 2 nails it with the content side of things, as it provides accessible and enjoyable modes for you to get lost in. I also want to mention the hardware Soulcalibur 2 runs on, all 4 of them. Before release, IGN reported that the game was running on Sega's Naomi arcade board, which powered games like The House of the Dead 2, Power Stone, Crazy Taxi, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and Guilty Gear X. The first Soulcalibur ran on the Namco System 12 board, which Namco used to make Tekken 3. However, it turned out that in a shocking revelation that never ever happened again, IGN was wrong about something related to games. Soulcalibur 2 actually runs on the Namco System 246 board, which is heavily based on the PS2, rendering games like Tekken 4, Time Crisis 3, and Capcom Fighting Evolution. I know this for a fact, because the producer of Soulcalibur 2, Hiroaki Toriyama, stated in an interview with IGN after being asked about whether the game will be releasing on a Nintendo-made arcade board, "We're currently developing this game based on the System 246, so I think that's just a rumor." Porting the game to the PS2 was a piece of cake for how similar the console and arcade board are in hardware, but I imagine that having the game run at 60 frames a second on the Xbox and the Gamecube would have been a different story. According to a 2003 interview with a programmer on the game that was translated into English by Beyond 3D forum user Fastforia, the programmer was asked about the 3 systems. "Did you notice any specific differences between the hardware?" The programmer replied, "As for the Gamecube, it would almost be a European style, an old style console. You can tell it's the console of the hardware maker that has been making consoles for a long time. What is necessary in games, what is really necessary is there, and stuff like the layout of the memory and other things just ends up being easy to use. You wouldn't think it looking at the specs, but when you use it, it ends up getting quite decent performance. It's a nice hardware without any excesses. I think the common verdict that its balance is good is ultimately correct." And about the Xbox, with the Xbox, like you'd think from just looking at it, it's just brute overwhelming power. It would be a waste to not use all that power, so we have done things like make it D4 compatible, splash on full screen anti-aliasing, etc. When game companies design game consoles from now on, in terms of efficiency and whatever, they will probably look at the Xbox as the standard. With this info coming to light, it's safe to say that Namco didn't run into any major issues when porting Soulcalibur 2 to home consoles. While the Xbox may be more powerful than the PS2 and Gamecube, all 3 consoles received the game without a hitch, and there was no one version that was objectively better than the other. When the game was finally released, it was lauded by critics, sitting at a 93 on Metacritic for the Gamecube and a 92 for the Xbox and PlayStation 2. Review outlets like Eurogamer, GamePro, Nintendo Power, and official US PlayStation magazine all gave the game perfect reviews. At the very first Spike Video Game Awards in 2003, it won the Most Addicting Game Award, and I think it's incredible that a fighting game took that award home. By 2006, The Gamecube version had sold 850,000 copies and made $32 million in the United States alone. Just over a decade after launch, Namco released Soulcalibur 2 HD Edition as a digital download for the PS3 and Xbox 360, featuring both Heihachi and Spawn in the same version of the game, which is still weird for me to look at. This HD port included online play, so you could troll people with Voldo from a comfortable isolation of your own home using the power of Xbox Live. Unfortunately, Soulcalibur 2 HD has been delisted for unknown reasons, but I suspect that it's due to the character licensing for Spawn being a headache to deal with. I made this video for two reasons. Firstly, I've never talked about Soulcalibur on the channel before, so I wanted to diversify my content a bit by discussing it, and secondly, it's been years since I've played Soulcalibur 2, so I wanted to return to it to see if it still holds up, and if you can't tell by now from my tone and choice of words, yes, it absolutely still holds up. This game is top quality from beginning to end, and I really enjoyed my time dicking around with Link and Nightmare, button mashing my way to victory in arcade mode. Thank you very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.